In the opening scene, we see the dawning of a new day in the coastal tourist Sicilian town of Torina, Italy. The voice of a famous folk musician Josie Day sings through the dark sky of the morning as she plays her guitar, rehearsing some songs. The same morning, Hal Flynn arrives in Sicily on a train. He calls Chris, who pleads with him to take a tour around Italy and probably visit Venice, Rome, or any interesting place at least. But Hal is uninterested in that. He'd rather do what he came for and nothing else except any place that was good enough for some of his favorite authors, Oscar Wilde or D.H. Lawrence. Hal alights the train to Sicily and checks into a hotel somewhere in town. After settling down, he takes his journal and strolls around the street. He gets intrigued by the lady playing Josie's song around the street. He walks over and gives her a tip at the end of the song. While also commending how good her cover sounds, one could mistake it for the original. Josie reveals she's not doing it for money and her song is an original, not a cover. Hal realizes he is speaking with the famous Josie Day. He instantly apologizes and confesses he's a fan of hers. He introduces himself and they engage in a conversation for a few minutes. Hal requests a favor from Josie, to which she obliges. She receives his phone and takes a snapshot of him from the point he chooses. Hal thanks her immensely and bids her goodbye. Josie watches him leave. While thinking about the things he said in the course of their conversation, she suddenly feels the need to call him back. Later in the evening, they hang out in a nice restaurant. Hal mentioned earlier that he hasn't had anything to eat since he arrived in Sicily, so Josie decides to help out. She finds some interesting facts about this aspiring writer and poet sitting right before her. She thinks he's trying to be modest as she wonders why he decides to lodge in a hotel where the famous author Oscar Wilde once stayed. Josie requests he read her one of the poems written in his journal, but Hal refuses. He believes she doesn't need to hear his short and uninteresting poem, but seeing how she's insisting, he agrees to do it only if she wouldn't pretend to be impressed by it. Josie smiles beautifully as he reads the poem. She tries to convince him that he is good and his poem isn't as bad as he thinks. Hal thinks she's just being extra nice or something. Seeing how jet-lagged he looks, Josie suggests she walks him back to his hotel so he can have some proper rest. She requests a meeting at the fountain later at 4. Hal agrees to make it there, but then he thinks it will be great if they exchange numbers just in case something comes up. However, she insists they do it the old Oscar Wilde way, by showing up at the agreed location by the agreed time. She chuckles as she reads the short poem he hands to her immediately after scribbling it on a piece of paper. Then she bids him goodnight as she makes her way to leave. Josie gets back home, takes her guitar, and tries to make a melody from what's written in the little note Hal gave to her earlier. As agreed the previous day, Hal arrives at the fountain on time, so he takes a seat and watches the environment while he waits for Josie to join him. She arrives and apologizes that his photos are not ready yet and it might take about 3 days to get them ready. Hal tells her it's not a problem since he will be in town for a week or so. Josie hands him a cup of Americano she gets on her way and offers to take him to see one of the best views in Torina if he will come along with her. She grabs her guitar and off they go. Hal is running out of breath as he climbs the mountain while complaining about this exercise, which feels like he's training for a triathlon. Josie simply chuckles, assuring him that he'll be fine. On getting to the top, Hal admires the scenery right before his eyes. The view inspires something poetic, so he quickly pens it down. Josie insists he shares his poem of the day, but he suggests she waits for later when he's done with it. She grabs her guitar to share the melody she cooked up last night since he doesn't want to share his just yet. Hal listens and smiles as she sings a verse from the note he scribbled down for her. She suddenly stops and Hal urges her to go on because it sounds really good. He makes a joke demanding 50% of whatever profit the song yields because he wrote the lines for it. Josie laughs heartily. Later in the evening, as they walk back down the different paths leading to their different residents, Hal attempts to sing the verse she played earlier while Josie laughs at how he sounds. On getting to where they need to part ways in different directions, Josie confesses she knows he didn't come to Sicily just to hang out with her but would want them to hang out at a cool spot she knows. Also, they might have to exchange contact since there's no fixed time or place. Hal insists they keep it old-fashioned and their meeting point would be at his hotel by noon. Josie chuckles and bids him goodnight. As they walk on their paths, Hal calls her back to tell her that he's done with the poem he titled Luca. He reads it out as she listens attentively. He walks away immediately after he's done reading his poem. Josie watches him leave. She brings out a printed copy of Hal's photo and stares at it for a second before continuing on her path home. The following day, Hal ensures he waits for Josie outside his hotel. The two seem to be getting close and their friendship is beginning to become more interesting as the day goes by. She soon joins him and they set out to explore the new spot Josie wants them to visit. They walk down the pathway leading to the amphitheater, one of Josie's favorite spots, where one can come to enjoy the scenery of the ancient ruins for free. Hal, on the other hand, feels he has found a good tour guide because this place looks amazing and he has never read anything about this place. They both walk around the ruins. Afterward, they stop at a restaurant nearby. Hal finds the food and architecture to be amazing. It feels like a blend of old and new, seeing all the ancient Greek sculptures right next to a building with various new additions. Josie brings out his photos from her bag and hands them over to him. He takes the picture and compares the quality with the one he has in his journal. Josie offers to take him somewhere since they seem to be getting pretty close, but he doesn't want to let go of all the good food in front of him. Josie insists and he begrudgingly gets up to join her. They arrive at the villa where Josie lives and she reveals that she would want him to stay in the house for the remaining days of his trip even though it is not exactly in the heart of Torina, but at least it will help him cut costs. Hal gushes over the building and its interior. He soon becomes surprised hearing Josie say the place was purchased by her boyfriend's parents. Hal doesn't want to stay in the house as her boyfriend might not be cool with a strange guy coming to stay in his parents' house, so he turns down her offer. Josie tries to convince him by explaining the fight between her boyfriend and her which has resulted in them falling out. She suggests he accepts the offer and they might not even be seeing each other as the place is large enough to house more people. Josie brings up an idea of them having a writer's retreat, simply two friends writing and looking for inspiration. She finally convinces Hal to accept the offer, but he still feels they are going to regret the outcome of the whole thing. She smiles and thanks him for accepting the writer's retreat. Josie accompanies him back to his hotel to pick up his things. After he checks out, the duo head back to the house. On getting back, Hal begins to unpack his things into a vacant room. Josie soon comes to make sure he's comfortable and lacks nothing. Later, she takes him to the balcony so he can enjoy the view of the sunset from there. She urges him to capture it in his writing and she brings out her guitar from its casing. She starts playing and singing about how they met. He finds it distracting to write while she plays. He questions why she thinks he's single, but he prefers she doesn't answer and respects the things they are not ready to talk about just yet. The new friends make a toast to the magical sunset while Josie continues playing. At night, though they are in separate rooms, they are finding it difficult to sleep. Hal decides to get into the kitchen to put together something. Josie walks into the kitchen and finds him dancing to the music blasting through his headphones. He can't hear her call his name, so she moves closer to tap him. She chuckles as he jumps in fear. She takes the coffee from him and offers to show him how to go about the preparation. Josie starts sharing how she fought with her boyfriend when he brought up marriage talks. She loves him, but she feels uncomfortable with the topic of marriage, and the whole thing resulted in a fight which led her boyfriend to leave for Switzerland angrily. She admits that since their last fight, neither of them has reached out to the other. Hal wonders why she doesn't want to settle down with him if she claims to love him. However, he doesn't want to interfere as it is none of his business. Josie assures him that it's easier for her to have difficult conversations at 2 a.m. She suggests he talk about his difficult issues, but Hal refuses, stating that he puts his thoughts and everything he finds too difficult to handle down on a paper. She decides to leave him be and not drag the conversation on. They take a cup from the coffee she prepared and they both walk into the sitting room. Josie requests he read her the sunset poem he put together earlier, but Hal tries to change the subject. But seeing how relentless she is, he gives up and goes ahead to read it out to her hearing. The following day, Josie throws some pillows on Hal, who slept off on the couch. He wakes up shouting for her to quit hitting him with the pillows, making her laugh. She tells him to put some clothes on and follow her out. Minutes later, they get out of the house and head to the car. Hal drives the car down to Sivoca, a little town a few miles up the coast. She wants him to come to see where some scenes of the movie Godfather were filmed. Hal confesses that his brother would love him to visit there, as he has been pleading with him to go out and visit some interesting places. Upon arrival, Josie takes Hal on some history tutorials while they sit at a spot enjoying their pizza. Hal confesses the writer's retreat is off to a great start and the changes in scenery are bringing quite a lot of inspiration to him as a writer, and her as a folk musician. Josie soon starts asking him questions because she feels their story is lopsided. He knows quite a lot about her while she knows almost nothing of him. Hal sighs as she becomes persistent about him, revealing why he decides to visit Torina. He agrees to tell her if she promises not to be sympathetic, and he'll get to do his thing in his perfect Brando impression that he's certain she loves so much. Josie agrees after hesitating, and he begins to imitate Marlon Brando as he tells her his story. He reveals that the woman in the photograph she helped him recreate is his mother, and she perished due to cancer about 2 weeks ago. Everybody who knew his mother confessed she was made of light and lived for her children. She was the only one who gave him confidence in his aspirations, and after her passing, she left her children some money and requested he do something special and meaningful. So he decided to visit her favorite place in the world, in an attempt to figure out how best to honor her legacy. Hearing his story of how he and his brothers are orphans triggers Josie's sympathy, but he reminds her of the promise she made, about not to be sympathetic. The duo sits silently for a minute before standing up to take a walk around the town. They return to the house later at night when everything is already dark. Josie remembers a song, so she picks up her guitar and starts playing, singing "Oh Hard Times" by the Longest Johns, as it reminds her of Hal. The next day, Hal successfully prepares coffee using the mocha pot. He brings some to Josie, who's playing her guitar in the living room, and she reveals that she has gotten something. He urges her to play, hoping she doesn't bail on him again. Several days pass and the duo becomes closer as they explore their talents, accepting the inspiration that comes. One time, they get mistaken for a couple by a waiter at a restaurant somewhere in town. Hal makes up a story of them enjoying their honeymoon, and Josie laughs. She corrects the notion and asks the waiter not to pay him any attention, as he's just being a little too dramatic. The guy, however, confesses their friendship exudes so much peace, one would think they've known each other for years. He calls for his father, who also mistakes the duo for a couple. The old man offers to cook something for them and runs back inside to get to it. The waiter appreciates the artistic touch they have and advises them to take a leap of faith in his Italian dialect. Their closeness keeps getting intense as Hal introduces Josie to his family over a video call, and they share secrets concerning their careers, also advising themselves on areas they've refused to explore. Especially Hal, who loves writing and scribbling every great thing that comes into his head, but he constantly refuses to let the world read his work. For him, he's fine even if no one reads what he writes. He just wants an avenue where he can pour out his heart, and he's got it in his notebook. Josie takes Hal to one of the active volcanoes around. As they climb, they start talking about Hal and the period before his mom's passing. Hal reminisces on the times he spent with her in the hospital and how he used to read his poems to her every day. He recounts her funeral and how it made him see life differently. He wishes his parents could have seen their grandchildren before passing, but then, life isn't always that way. He notices the quietness of Josie and apologizes for dragging the topic too long. He realizes that she must have lost someone she loves from the looks on her face. They spend the rest of the time chatting and making jokes. Later in the evening, Josie is getting dressed up for their last night together as Hal will be going back to Iowa with the first flight in 2 days. Hal finds a disc from when Josie was in college, so he calls her out to come see what he found. She pleads with him to ignore the disc as she sang that song when she was much younger. He refuses to listen. He sets it to play while he takes her hand dancing to the song. They arrive at a club where Josie expects to hear some good music, but she gets disappointed. As a musician, she believes she and some others try so hard to put good music into the world, but people prefer listening to the loud techno music blasting through the stereos. Hal offers to go grab some drinks since she doesn't want them to check out elsewhere. He takes too long. She notices that he is talking with some people and they are approaching her. Hal introduces her to them as the famous musician that she is. He informs her that Elizabeth and Kenny are in Torina for the weekend. Elizabeth is glad she ran into some Americans here in Italy. She suggests they do some shots. She invites Hal to come visit them in Florence sometime when he's back in the States. Josie stays still as she observes how Elizabeth is giving so much attention to Hal. And when she finally starts talking to her, she jumps up, inviting Hal to join her on the dance floor before she could even respond. Still watching them, she watches as she holds Hal, and before she knows what's going on, they are already kissing. She confirms from Kenny that they are just friends. Josie picks up her bag and informs Kenny she will be leaving. She gets into her car and decides to call her boyfriend. Meanwhile, after the dance session, Hal realizes that Josie must have gone home. He bids his new friends goodbye and heads to the villa. He doesn't know why, but he feels the need to apologize to Josie. The next morning, he wakes up searching for Josie, but he finds a note close to where he is sleeping. A few moments later, he walks towards where she is sitting outside in an ancient garden. He offers to read her a poem for the week, which he titles Joker. Josie claims she's not upset about the incident with Elizabeth and she doesn't want to talk about it. He insists on apologizing for what happened the previous night and suggests that the reason she feels upset about it might be because she feels exactly the way he feels towards her. Josie cuts in and reveals that she might not be upset about that, but because he intends on going back to Iowa to continue working in a printing press instead of putting his mother's money into good use by taking some time off to write his book. The conversation leads to an unpleasant lash out at each other as Hal feels she's interfering in his life when she's too scared to put out another song after her last one, which everyone likes. He goes further by dragging her relationship issue into their disagreement, which causes Josie to express her disappointment in him. She decides to move out of the villa into the hotel where he was lodged before. It doesn't matter to her if he has just one more night to spend in Torina. Hal gets back to the villa and packs his things into his bag. He steps out and sees Josie by the doorpost. He hands her a card just in case she needs apparel for a concert or something. The silence between them gets awkward as they try to figure out the right thing to say to each other before Hal leaves. Suddenly, they hear the sound of a car door slam. Looking out, Josie sees her boyfriend, Dean. She turns towards Hal and tells him to go hide now before Dean sees him. Hal begins to panic as he remembers telling her that this whole arrangement to stay at her place will end terribly. Josie welcomes her boyfriend in and Hal listens to their awkward conversation. As soon as Dean walks into the house, Hal hurries out of the house before Dean comes back out. When Josie walks into Dean's room, he hands her some chocolates he got for her and then picks up his ring, which he left behind angrily. She watches him in silence for a while before she breaks the silence, informing him that she needs to go take a walk. She drives off in her car while trying to reach Hal. He sees her call on his phone but refuses to answer it as he watches the phone ring until the screen goes off. Later at night, Hal decides to spend his last night in Torina hanging out with Elizabeth. They chat for a few minutes, but he isn't feeling the vibe he wants, so he excuses himself for a minute. He walks into the bathroom and drops a message for Josie and her voicemail before going back to join Elizabeth. Not long afterward, Josie arrives at the scene and she can see Elizabeth sitting close to Hal. She turns back instantly and begins to take her leave. Fortunately, Hal sees her, so he excuses himself and runs after her to explain that he just wants the company to chat with for the night, which is why he's out with Elizabeth. They engage in a little discussion and accept that though everything they said to each other the previous day was mean, nevertheless, it is exactly what they need to hear to set them straight. She confesses that she told Dean she has a little confession to make and his photos didn't take 3 days to be ready. The duo resolve their dispute and agree to meet at the plaza the next day by 7 a.m. Hal gets back to Elizabeth while Josie heads back home to meet Dean. She picks up her guitar and sits on Dean's bed as she begins to play a melody. Very early the next morning, Josie runs to meet Hal at the plaza. She apologizes for running late and he hands his notebook to her. He wants her to have it for now and he reveals he's going to take her advice to write something for the world to read. Maybe his mom will be proud of him for taking the advice of a smart girl he met in Torina. Josie smiles and takes the notebook from him. He reveals there's something on the last page for her. At her request, he reads her a poem for the day and hugs her one last time. He places a kiss on her forehead before walking off to catch his flight. 3 months after Hal left Torina, he gets on with working on something he can publish just like Josie advises him to. On a good day, he's busy typing on his typewriter when his door flings open to let Chris into his house. He finds Chris's attitude of just showing up to be quite normal nowadays, so there's no point complaining. He hands him a package that was sent to the store for him. Though surprised, Hal opens it to check what's in the envelope. He realizes it's from Josie. He shushes his brother as he brings out a note with a date, time, and venue for a meeting. His face lightens up with a smile realizing that Josie is in Iowa. Hal meets up with her and he finds some new interesting facts as Josie makes some revelations. Her new single will be coming out the next day and she has a show for tonight. She shares that she made him a co-writer on the single, so she wants to play it for him first. After hearing her play and sing beautifully, Hal is just so speechless as they stare at each other's faces smiling. He's glad this extraordinary musician is ready to put another song into the world once again.